Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I think so. Good afternoon. Hello. If everybody could take their seats, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andy Harris, CCUM board member and chair of CCUM's Environmental Committee for the past 11 years. I also serve on East Hampton Town's Coastal Assessment and Resiliency Planning Committee and also the Waterfront Advisory Committee. Let me begin by welcoming you all, 100 plus here today, members of the audience and those that are watching us via our live link, some upstairs, some via webinar and some using LTV's YouTube broadcast. Special thanks to our panelists, who I will introduce shortly, and to the Montauk Library, Denise DiPaolo and Brett Manser, for making the Susan Gossman Community Room available for us for today's event. I'd also like to thank LTV's broadcast engineer, Jason Noah, Zach Minskoff, who's here with us, and Michael Clark from LTV for enabling the technology that allows for this broadcast today. This forum represents one of many community coastal resiliency forums that CCUM has helped facilitate since 2013. And based on the overwhelming response to today's event, I expect it will not be the last. Many of you know CCUM and our 50-year history here in Montauk fighting to preserve and protect our environment. And today we have many members of our 12-person board in attendance, along with our executive director, Kay Tyler, who helped check you in upstairs, and Daniel Frazier, who's sitting and helping facilitate the work behind the scenes to get all of this done. Thank you both. As Montauk's leading environmental nonprofit, we are proud of our history in land preservation and our focus on three critical areas essential to Montauk's future: coastal resiliency, water quality, and environmental sustainability. More information on our work is available on our website, which is preservemontauk.org, and in the trifold brochures available here today. You're also very welcome to visit our offices here in Montauk at 6 Elmwood Avenue, South Elmwood Avenue. I believe we can all agree that climate change, coastal erosion, sea level rise, and increased hurricane frequency and intensity pose an existential threat to our community. However, in many respects, since Superstorm Sandy in 2012, our community has been proactive in helping address the impact of climate change on our coastline and our community. The CARP plan, Coastal Assessment Resiliency Plan, adopted by the town in 2022, provides a comprehensive understanding of Montauk's coastal risks and highlights the strategies and options that can help reduce our vulnerability. I'd just like to do a quick head count. How many in the audience in front of it here today have had a chance to review the CARP plan, read it, reviewed it, understand it? Just a show of hands, what do we got? 10% or so? So there's going to be plenty of opportunity for you to be able to better understand that work, both from the presentations today, but also from the work that'll be ongoing in that space. I would be remiss to not highlight a recent significant achievement, which has been the 600,000 cubic yards of ocean dredge sand pumped onto Montauk's downtown beaches by the Army Corps earlier this year, and their commitment to continue to replenish that beach for the next 30 years as part of the FIMP plan. And a huge thanks is due to our elected officials, both at the town level, at the county, at the state, and at the federal level. And a special shout out to Councilman David Lees, who couldn't be with us today, but did an incredible job in advancing that work with our federal partners. In addition, East Hampton Town was recently awarded a $600,000 New York State grant for sustainable coastal planning in Montauk. Both Kate and Sam are intimately involved in this work, which is expected to begin this year, and Kate will be providing more information today on this exciting development. Before introducing the first of our speakers, it is worth noting that during the next 30 years, the chance of Montauk experiencing a flood event similar to the 1938 hurricane at least once in the next 30 years is about 60%. It's a very high percentage in terms of expectations for significant coastal damage here in Montauk. In addition, during that time, sea level rise is projected to increase between 12 and 30 inches. And climate change is likely to increase the frequency and intensity of hurricanes. And just last week, as I'm sure many of you are aware, NOAA predicted above normal hurricane activity in the Atlantic Ocean this year. Clearly, the clock is ticking and we need to act now. The format for today will be a series of presentations given by each of our speakers here today. And they will also respond to some of the questions that you have submitted in advance. There will also be the opportunity for written questions, which should be handed to Kay, and we will get to those time permitting because we have a hard stop at 5:30 and we're looking to respect that. So without further ado, I would like to share our screen. Here we go. And you can see that this is our list of presenters, and a range of topics are to be covered by each. Our first presenter today is Dr. Henry Bokuniewicz. He's a distinguished service professor at Stony Brook School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences, whose research includes nearshore transport processes, coastal groundwater hydrology, coastal sedimentation, and marine geophysics. He was also recently hired by East Hampton Town to advise on recommendations for ditch plains. And an interesting note, Dr. Bokuniewicz's pupil, Jay Tansky, worked with us here in 2013 to help understand Montauk's coastal dynamics in the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy. So, Dr. Bokuniewicz, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andy. The study of beaches, as you all know, is an empirical science. It's based on observations. Beaches, as we see them, are so changeable that the only way to really know what they're doing is to watch them. So anyone, and that includes everyone in this room who has seen a beach, has some claim on expertise in certain processes acting on the coastline. Fortunately, there are some rules, some conventional wisdom that we apply to what we see on the beach in order to make sense of as what's happening. But part of my message today is that these rules, this conventional wisdom has to be tailored to fit the local situations. So there are lots of buts when you start talking about the conventions on the coastal processes. So this is a little beach, part of beach at Hither Hills. And it's fair to say that sand on this beach has come from the east on the erosion of Montauk Bluffs, or the bluffs further to the east. But when you look at what the bluffs are made out of, very little of that soil is suitable for beach sand. And in fact, the supply of sand that we find on the beach has to be coming in large part from offshore, and I mean far offshore, like miles offshore. The other part of that piece of conventional wisdom is that the sand is moving pushed by the waves from the east to the west, and that's true. But if you go out to the beach and watch it day after day, you'll find that the sand moves from west to east more frequently than it moves from east to west. That's because the prevailing winds are coming off the Jersey shore and causing the waves that are pushing the sand towards Montauk, not the reverse. However, but the bigger waves come from the ocean. So the bigger waves are coming from the eastern side. So even though they don't occur as frequently as the waves heading towards the east, they have much more power and push much more sand. So when you add all this up, when you create a balance sheet, you do get a net drift of sand, movement of sand from the east to the west. Now, that longshore transport of sand, people on the beach tend to think that's what's happening right around their feet. And as a piece of conventional wisdom, that's true. You might have remembers from Mrs. Schwartz's geography class a little cartoon of a sand grain rolling up the beach and then rolling down at a little angle of the beach. And that does happen, but that is not the longshore transport. The longshore transport occurs everywhere from the shoreline out in this slide to that whitish band that runs across the ocean offshore. It's about 250 yards from shore, and everywhere from the shoreline to that band is where this longshore motion of sand is occurring. And in fact, most of the sand is moving out on that strip offshore. That's the location of the offshore bar. So this river of sand that we talk about is impacting the beaches is much more extensive than the beaches themselves. And in fact, a great deal of the volume of sand that's being pushed around is being pushed far from the shoreline as we see it. In this case, this river of sand is an active feature. It wanders in and out and up and down. And you can see on this slide that offshore bar location, that light band that runs across the center, has some structure to it. It waves in and out, and this will change as the conditions of the waves change. You can also see on here a little bit of a connection between what we see standing on the beach and the bar. On the right-hand side of that, where the bar is pushing itself offshore, if you look carefully at the shoreline takes sort of a mirror image of the bar's orientation. As the bar pushes out, the shoreline pushes in. As the bar pushes in, the shoreline pushes out. And this is common occurrence out there, one that we don't have much information in usually by basis of observations, because we just don't have many observations hundreds of yards offshore as to what the condition is. But the longshore transport of sand is occurring. It's occurring in both directions. It's occurring not just from Montauk, but from sand supplies offshore. And it's occurring in a wide band beyond the shoreline. Can I have the next slide, Andy? So how do we start to make sense of this? This is a graph of wave conditions. And it's the wave conditions starting in January 2023, running up until about the end of April 2024. And this graph is measuring whether or not the sand from the beach is going out to the offshore bar, or whether the sand from the bar is coming in to the Severio beach. So at each of those peaks, that's when the waves were pushing sand off the beach and into the bar, and we'd see the beach erode, but the bar would be building up. The intervening intervals in the valleys is when the waves were such that they were moving sand from the bar and building up onto the beach. And in this slide way over on the left are a series of storms that happened in the winter of 2023. And then on the right-hand side, those two highest peaks are the December storm, mid-December, and the mid-January storms that caused so much alarm out here. And you can see that in beginning of 24, just as it occurred in 23, a number of these storms come by. On average, they do tend to come by about every 6 days to fight the weather. Those big storms in 23 and 24 was what raised the alarm on Ditch Plains Beach. Oh, the next slide, please. I'm clicking this thing like I can do something. This is a picture of the beach profile. It's as if you cut through the beach and tipped it up on edge. And I've actually showed two of these. One that was measured in the fall of 1998, and another one which you might see up in the right-hand side labeled March of 2024. I chose the fall 98 profile because it illustrates two things. First of all, there's a big pile of sand about 1,000 feet from shoreline where that bar position is. This is sand that had been moved off the beach by storms early in 98. The other thing to see here is that as you get right to the shoreline, right to the sea level, the shape of the beach in 98 was not all that different than the beach we saw in March of 2024. So despite all the alarm on erosion of the beach, it has been in that position before. And looking at the monitoring of the beach wave attack, what has happened since then many times is that the sand that has gone off to the bar, moving in that outer edge of the river of sand, will eventually make its way back onto the beach. And we count on that happening. The real question is, of course, what happens next? That's a difficult one. As Yogi Berra said, predictions are tough, especially about the future. We have to hope that the sand will come back as it has done year after year, although the timing and extent of that is always going to be open to question. Andy, I'm going to stop there and push on. Everybody's muted now except me. You take over again.
Yeah. Yes, Dr. Bokuniewicz, the question is, how does artificial, and I'm assuming we mean the Army Corps sand, affect wave dynamics on our beaches?
Yeah, well, the sand used for beach nourishment, it's not really artificial sand. It's sand that is making its way to the beaches anyway. You got to realize that beach nourishment projects are some of the biggest excavation and deposition projects in the world. So this is sort of like open heart surgery along a stretch of coastline. There's a large disturbance when that happens. Usually part of that is the fine grain material that was in the borrow sand gets washed out, increasing turbidity. The grain size on the beach changes. So there are a number of changes that have to go through and be sorted out by the waves. But as I was pointing out, much of what we see happening at the shoreline is dependent on what is happening hundreds of yards from shore. And that remains a little bit of a mystery, but you can be assured that the beach that's being put out there is going to readjust to the prevailing waves and try to establish itself in the condition it was before the nourishment. So there's a large disturbance when these things happen. But past history has shown, and the physics of sediment transport suggests that the waves will readjust the beach itself to the form that we're used to. I don't know what else to say. Artificial sand, you gotta be a little careful with that term. I've seen a beach made out of tin cans, actually, some places. But on the North Shore of the South Fork, people have put out olivine sand, which is not artificial, but it's a non-native material in it. And that does have also effects on combating coastal ocean acidification. I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I'm good. One of the things I would add is that the Army Corps, when they completed their work, provided expectations of what we might see in the downtown beaches over the next 4 years. And I think that's a very helpful schematic representation of the impact over time and what will happen, what we might anticipate happening on the downtown beach before they come back in 4 years and replenish again. So if folks have not seen that, it's been in a recent CSUM newsletter, and we'll be sure to make sure that everybody has access to that information. So we manage expectations about what we might see on those beaches over the next 4 years. Thank you, Dr. Bokuniewicz. I'm going to turn now. Please stay with us, though. I'm now going to turn to Samantha Klein. Samantha is responsible for intergovernmental relations in East Hampton Town and previously worked for East Hampton Town's Natural Resources Department for 6 years and was the project lead on the creation and development of the CARP plan. She has collaborated with many of our local organizations, including CSUM, the Nature Conservancy, and the Montauk Chamber of Commerce. She is also a Montauk resident. So Sam, without further ado, I'd hand it to you.
Oh, some intro. I feel important all of a sudden. Great. So I wanted to first talk a little bit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the coastal risks for most coastal communities, but for Montauk in particular, as well as the entire town of East Hampton. Some of the things that draw people to Montauk are some of the same things that make it so vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and coastal risks. You know, I love something about Montauk is if you drive for 5 minutes, you're probably going to end up on the water or near the water. But that also speaks to how Montauk really is just a sliver of land that juts out into the ocean. So some of the main risks that we're looking at or hazards are shoreline erosion, flooding, and rising sea levels. The reason why we're concerned about those is that they have a large impact to different aspects that make a community function and make it resilient. So whenever we're talking about projects or planning or community partnerships, really what we're trying to focus on is how do we mitigate the impact of these risks, which are loss of our beaches, our dunes, our bluff systems, impacts to our roadways, our railways, as well as direct impacts to properties, to homes, to businesses, as well as the economic damages and recovery costs or loss of business and inactivity when these events occur. Also lifeline facilities, power, water, wastewater, and the ability for emergency response services to do what they have to do and reach you in the case of a major problem. Thanks. So Montauk has certain areas of very low topography. Some of those low-lying areas are also located between two bodies of water. This poses a risk because if there's large flood inundation, those areas are very vulnerable. So we see this between Fort Pond and Fort Pond Bay over the Industrial Road area, as well as the Ditch Plains residential community. We saw significant flooding there earlier this year around the holidays. And part of that is because although there are some high points, it does come to a valley. And so there is flooding that goes from South Lake to the Ditch Plains beach. That also happens in downtown Montauk, where that's really our main road artery to get in and out of Montauk. So it's critical locations that are very low lying. There's also shoreline change. A lot of our beach in Montauk is retreating. So this was a part of a study through Dewberry analysis that was funded by NYSERDA. And then that information was further explored in the Coastal Assessment Resiliency Plan. We have very low depth to groundwater in different areas. That's a concern mainly because a lot of properties, pretty much all properties, have on-site septic systems in Montauk. And so those are subsurface. So when you have rising groundwaters and already low depth to that groundwater, there are water quality concerns that come from that. This also shows the 100-year flood. That terminology is changing over time because 100 years, you think it will only happen once in 100 years, but it's 1% each year. But a more common way of looking at it has been to look at a 30-year period. I think that comes from 30-year mortgages. It's kind of a lifetime thing that people are more familiar talking in 30 years. So it has a 26% chance of occurring once in that 30-year period. So the Coastal Assessment Resiliency Plan that the town did, it was a town-wide study, but in that study, the town, in coordination with partners and with regional representatives from different organizations, chose specific focus areas to look at. We wanted to make sure that consultants weren't being hired to look at a very generic broad plan. We wanted it to say specific roads, specific areas throughout the town that were actually going to be looked at and assessed for impacts as well as for solutions. So Montauk had some of those focus areas, and they're listed here: downtown Montauk, Ditch Plains, the industrial road area, as well as the Montauk Harbor and Claude and Soundview Drive areas. Yes, no, you're doing great. So I know we just went oriented and proactive. But a big part of the conversation before we're talking about options, solutions, forthcoming projects, we want to first know what our problems are, what our risks are, and then we can begin the conversation on how do we avoid those, how do we reduce and mitigate those risks of shoreline erosion, flooding, sea level rises, and the cascading impacts from that. So these are some principles of resilience. They come from a combination of CARP, from community partners input, as well as from the Department of State. They released a set of DOS principles of resilience. But one of them is to let nature do the work. If we make nature our adversary, that's a fight that we will lose. So it's better to see if we can be an ally to that wherever possible. So not only can we use nature to help us, we can make way for the water, but we can also implement green infrastructure projects or do plantings. Oh, yes. But we can implement green infrastructure projects, or we can do plantings to help with dunes and bluff systems. They can hold the sand in place. With plantings, they can absorb some of the water and wave energy. So we can actually utilize nature to our advantage where possible. Another thing is to use layered approaches of multiple resilience measures. There's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. So we have to look at many different projects, work on them simultaneously, both short-range, immediate, as well as long-range planning. So code changes, roadway improvements, as well as living shorelines and different groups. Inclusive and transparent decisions. So the town has, like most municipalities, a process for going through public hearings, having things presented at public work sessions and posted, open for public comment and feedback. But I think that in my time with the town, this is definitely broadening to include not only public education of this is what we did, why we did it, why we want to sell you on it, but it's also, well, how do we bring in partners? How do we bring in the public and make it more of a stakeholder engagement project? Bring people in at a point in the project where their input matters and can actually make effective change and guidance in that project. Solutions with multiple benefits. If you have a project that can do multiple things, like a property at risk, and if it comes up for acquisition, and then we have a CPF program and it can be converted to open space, or with a living shoreline that it both builds out the shoreline and can create more habitat. Maybe if we use certain elements like ribbed mussels and oyster reefs that can do a water quality improvement effort while absorbing water energy and building out the shoreline. And then sharing costs and benefits equitably, looking at how it can have a broader impact for the full community and make sure that all of our partners are included and at the decision-making table, and that decisions aren't being made for people, but with people. Yeah, so I think that is all I have, but yeah, looking forward to the conversation with everybody.
Sam, thank you so much. So our next presenter is Leo Daunt. Leo will be familiar to many of you. He is president of the Montauk Chamber of Commerce, which has more than 300 members representing 85% of Montauk's business community. As president, Leo has been leading the chamber's modernization efforts and establishing partnerships with our community groups such as CCOM. Leo and his family are generational downtown property owners in Montauk and have owned the iconic Daunt's Albatross Motel since 1976. He also serves on the town's CARP committee, the Coastal Assessment Resiliency Planning Committee, and the Business Advisory Committee. So I'm going to set up Leo's coverage of his presentation.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to go directly after the doctor and Sam, who have a lot more knowledge on coastal resilience than I do. But I've been lucky to learn from them the past couple of years and sit in on a lot of these meetings. And I do have 10 years of experience running our business and just being involved in a lot of conversations with other business owners about this topic. All right, so how do we combine economic and environmental sustainability? So I figured it'd be smart to start with a definition of what they are. You guys can all read this. Economic sustainability is when an activity or practice, financial or not, helps to support long-term financial growth while keeping the environment, community, and social factors in mind. You working?
Screen, please.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. So recently, the Nature Conservancy reached out to East Hampton Town and the Montauk Chamber of Commerce with an opportunity they had a private donor who had funds to re-engage the business community on the topic of coastal resilience in Montauk in general, which has been a very hard, complex topic to tackle because there's so many different factors when it comes to that downtown. In the 70s and 80s, building on the dunes probably wasn't the best idea. And we all realize that now, right? But at the same time, there are hundreds of hotel rooms on those dunes that support an entire economy now. And if you just shut down one of those hotels, you don't know what else is going to happen down the line. So during the process of CARP, it's been a contentious conversation. So the Nature Conservancy had a grant and they came to us with this idea to, hey, let's re-engage the business community and see what we can do to restart a conversation. So that's what we did. So I'm going to very quickly bring you guys through the results of that process. So the approach was that we found JLPD, which recently worked with the Playhouse and did an amazing job. So they had already researched a lot of the economic data in Montauk, a lot of the demographics. So they had a big head start on any other contractor that we could have found. So their idea was to get an advisory committee together and then engage with different stakeholders in the community. So that wound up being 11 business leaders, a community organizer, 2 local government officials, and 1 NPO. So what they eventually came back to us with were points of concern, points of consensus, and recommendations for the future. One of the things they found was that in this post-COVID economic status, a lot of people had moved to Montauk on a year-round basis. And then after COVID was kind of retreating a little bit, a lot of those people had moved back out of Montauk. So people that were used to, in January and February, having a sustainable business were really struggling to keep their doors open. So a lot of even the restaurants that we all love to go to, or the cafes that are downtown that are open year round that we go and get our lunch from, are really right now in considering closing for the entire winter, which I don't know how many of you live here year round. January can be tough, and without Naturally Good, it'd be really tough. So I hope, we really hope, while we're addressing coastal resilience in downtown, to also address the fact that we need to have year-round business in Montauk in order to have a community. So a big point of concern was, how are we going to have that year-round business? Demographic changes are accelerating. It is so hard to find quality help who can live in this town. And that is just something you hear from every business, whether or not it's the big corporation that just bought someone out, or it's the mom and pops that are around our business. It's so hard to find help that can afford to live here, or it's at the school trying to find teachers to live here. It's almost impossible. So the point of concern was, hey, it might look like Montauk is this amazing, like on Memorial Day weekend, you look around and you say, wow, what a great place to do business. But in reality, it's extremely hard to do business in this town. Going back to that affordability crisis, there's some data here. One of the pros that we found though was that there is remote work happening. That how do we actually attract that to provide that year-round base? So some points of consensus was that while we are looking at how do we address the downtown, also looking at how do we address affordable housing, workforce housing, being able to walk around safely in the downtown. Every business owner that we talked to wanted a vision for that vibrant year-round downtown. And there was a shared understanding of Montauk's vulnerability to recent climate events. We did this before the FIMP project had happened and right after all those winter storms. So at the time that we were doing this, there was barely any beach, which is terrifying. So there is a recognition that resilience planning and smart growth planning can and should be done together, which is really important because we all want to protect our community, but we also want there to be a community to protect. And without teachers and firemen and the dishwasher at your local restaurant being able to live in that town, then you don't have a town to protect. So we need to look at the economy while we look at the environment at the same time. Another thing that we found as a point of concern and a point of consensus was that the divide that was happening on this topic made no sense because our business community and our residents are interconnected, and what's good for our residents is going to be good for our business community. These healthy year-round businesses that we have are going to provide diverse and quality services, and we all want good, healthy options to eat at. If God forbid, or somebody has a wedding in Montauk, you want your family to be able to come and enjoy staying at that place. So the economy being strong doesn't mean that the environment has to be bad. A tagline that I found at the chamber from like 1965 was, "The environment is our economy." And it really can't be more true. Like if you look at any of the guests that come and stay with us, they come to hike Shadmore and go to the beach. So from the business community perspective, our thoughts are like, we're all on board with trying to address this crisis in Montauk. And all the year-round residents that we talk to as part of this and the town government officials are like, we want a strong year-round economy as well. So I think that bridging that gap between, the business community and the residents and actually speaking to that a lot and saying, hey, we're all on the same team here, is really important to us at the chamber. So one of the recommendations that JLPD came back with was to combine comprehensive smart growth planning into resilience planning. Enhanced density, mixed use, walkability. While we really have an opportunity while these recommendations that are coming out with CARP and with this grant that's coming down the pipeline, this $600,000 grant, it's going to identify very specific changes to downtown Montauk. And the recommendation here is pretty much just saying, hey, while we're identifying these changes, there's an opportunity here to create strategies for year-round business growth, to make sure that we're addressing affordable housing for teachers, for firemen, for middle income people. If not even just affordable housing, rational housing. If you're trying to buy a house, if any one of you children are growing up in this community, you need to make like $300,000 in order to buy a house here. There's lawyers that can't afford to buy a home in Montauk. So this is something that we really need to address at the same time as we address the environmental crisis that's happening. So yeah, we need to embrace emergency planning. Another thing we came to during this process was that it's not just the hotels on that row that are under threat. One of the biggest things we keep going back to is food resiliency. God forbid we get one of those 1% floodplain storms. The IGA is our one supermarket, and it is the lowest sea level in Montauk. So we really need to look at that at the same time as we look at whether or not a hotel is going to be there. And we should probably look at IGA stronger. So yeah, this was done by Thad, and I thought it was a really useful way of looking at the combination of economic and environmental risk. So I really wanted everyone to get a chance to look at it. You can see up top, there's some of the resilience, emergency preparedness, wastewater treatment, ecological restoration, business resiliency, workforce housing, and these really all go together at the same time. You can't address off-season decline and flood insurance without also addressing workforce housing. It's impossible. And something that I feel really passionately about too is the loss of character, because everyone always talks about how much Montauk is changing, right? But luckily, in reality, actually, and I'm sure Rick will tell you, there hasn't really been any new building in downtown Montauk since the early 1980s when there was that moratorium. So making sure that we can address that coastal erosion problem that's happening right there while not changing the character of what we all love about Montauk is really important to me as well. Another recommendation, and this is something that at the Chamber we feel really strongly about, is we need to perform an economic analysis that explores how residents and Montauk businesses, especially the hospitality industry, are interconnected and interdependent. And that needs to be done at the same time and before we make any severe code changes in the downtown. Because if we change what's happening in the downtown without looking at how that's going to affect families that rely on that, and whether or not there's going to be available housing in 20 years, because it's already bad, then we are going to run into serious problems. We're going to miss a big opportunity. So yeah, unpacking what's driving and hampering Montauk businesses' growth, especially on a year-round basis. Understanding the recent change with customer and population attraction. And yeah, exploring a shared vision for Montauk during the off-season. I mean, this is something that we want to, at the Chamber level, we want to connect with all of you about. Hey, who's here in January? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? What do you want to see change about it? What could we do to convince your children to come move back to Montauk or to stay here? So this is a conversation that we really want to have at the same time as we have the coastal erosion conversation. That's it.
Leo, thank you so much. Leo, thank you so much. We will move to back to our presentation here. Thank you, Leo. Okay with the sound? Thank you. We're just doing a little tech check on sound here. This is, again, the first time we've been able to broadcast from the Montauk Library. Town Board work sessions are now being broadcast second Tuesday of each month from the Montauk Library. The first was held last month. The next will be next Tuesday. So hope you all come back. The Town Board is actually bringing Montauk-centric items to the agenda on each of these work sessions. And it's a similar setup to what you're seeing today. And hopefully we'll see more of you here at these work sessions. So I'm now going to turn over to Cate Rogers. I have great pleasure in introducing Cate. Cate is the Deputy Supervisor of East Hampton Town, and I'm just getting my bits and pieces
Thanks.
here.
Will you work that for me, Andy?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Let me just. So Cate, she previously served on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Many of you may know the Zoning Board of Appeals and been in front of them for various appeals.
Thanks for that beginning.
Yeah. She is no longer involved in Zoning Board of Appeals. However, she is the liaison currently to the Natural Resources Department, an incredibly important department within the town, led by Kim Shaw. The Planning Department, another critically important department within the town, led by Jeremy Samuelson, a former executive director of CCOM, and also Code Enforcement. So those three agencies and Cate's role in working with them directly is very important, and she brings great experience, not only through her prior work within the town, where she's also working on the zoning code amendments project. She's also a climate reality project leader and mentor, and was co-chair and founding member of the New York State Coalition of Climate Reality Chapters. So thank you, Cate, for being here. We really appreciate it. And Thank you again.
Thank you, Andy. And first, I'd like to thank CCOM, my fellow panelists, and everyone here from the community that's participating, either in person or in Zoom. These are the most important conversations we can have and be able to come up with solutions. This is the only way we're going to do it, is when we all get together and we all talk about it. And we understand from everyone's point of view what's important, where we are and where we've been and how we can come together. And I think in the past, there was this idea, environmentals were in one circle. Business owners were over here, government officials were over here. But when I was learning at Climate Reality Project, one of the first things I learned was that we have to get out of our silos and all come together and work in that middle circle. And that's the way that we find solutions. It's tried and true, and the best solutions come from the most engagement. So coming to events like this, CCOM hosting events like this, the study that was done, the future studies that are coming, the studies that have been done in the past, are all pieces to put together this resiliency and sustainability future. And I'm glad we use those words now instead of coastal erosion or, climate crisis, because that's where you get every sector of society involved. By we're looking for a resilient and a sustainable future. And that's what we're here to do. So coastal resiliency and facilitating the development plans for the future is one of the town's top priorities, along with the affordable housing crisis. Again, you can't work in silos to solve problems. That's not new from the town, and it's certainly not new for me as a person. Growing up on the beaches of Long Island, from very little, I was a beach rat, water rat. The first few dollars that my family made in here, we got an old boat and we started to go out on the boat, and we never got off of it. We were addicted to the beaches. We came out here for the summers with the boat, and that's why this town is been important to me from the, sorry to say, my age, the late 60s. The town has a long history of attention to coastal preservation, actually, and this began with the first zoning codes in the 50s, where we established distances from our bluff crests and our environmental features to development. The development of the comprehensive plan, the LWRP that Andy mentioned before, that's actually the vehicle that we were able to access the grant that I'll talk about later. And that's the local waterfront revitalization plan, the Hamlet studies, the CPF program, and finally looking at coastal resilience. Also just this year, having had all those prior studies, and why are these studies important? They get adopted into the comprehensive plan after public hearings, and then they become the municipal town's roadmap and legal backbone for being able to initiate change or change codes or anything that we do. So I'll start with Andy, the Montauk Hamlet plan. I'm going to go back and just kind of overview how we got to where we are this discussion now. So as many of you know, the Montauk Hamlet plan is a 110-page plan. In May 2020, the East Hampton Town Board unanimously voted to adopt the Hamlet studies to the town comprehensive plan after years of public input. There were studies for each hamlet, and they were developed by consultants with community engagement at the aim to maintain East Hampton's status as a resort and second home destination. The plan considered ways to create walkable hamlet centers while preserving the area's natural resources, open space, unique areas, demographics, historic and cultural resources, land use, zoning, economics, and environmental challenges. On the second slide, Andy, let me see if I put myself out of order. This is the list of the, this is directly taken, a quote from the Montauk Hamlet study. Now, that was a comprehensive study that looked at all sectors of Montauk, economics, et cetera. But they did have a section in the Hamlet study on climate change and coastal resilience, and sea level rise and the other impacts of climate change were recognized as one of the most important issues for the future of the hamlet. Participants expressed an interest in finding consensus on sea level rise assumptions, using good data and finding issues where all could agree. Support existed for a multifaceted approach to resilience strategies, including managed retreat, which is the worst word that anybody's ever come up with. Retreat is me, never retreat, first of all. And, taking care of the dogs or anything, but it's also not what it is, a term that doesn't describe what that is. What that would be for me, I would call it managed relocation, and also a thought of how can we make sure that these legacy businesses in our town can go on when they're threatened by the sea level rises. How do we keep the businesses going? How do we recover? How do we make sure that after a storm, we can get back up and running? What's the plan? So these studies provided the basis of what I believe is the next most important step, and that is implementation. I hear it said on the panel many times. I hear it on many places that I go to speak or go to listen. We need a plan. We need a plan. And yes, once the studies, we feel like we're at a part where we understand what's going on. The next part that's most important for me is a plan for implementation. So next slide, Andy. So kind of a LWRP part 2, I guess, is the CARP plan. And I saw many hands go up of people that have read through it. I applaud you. There is an 83-page executive summary and 741 pages of attachments. So raise your hands again, because I think the applause should be bigger for you. It's a very comprehensive document. Andy, you can go to the next slide, please. It takes into consideration many of the earlier studies, like Dewberry, kind of these separate studies that were sitting on the shelf where we've been looking at our coastline for quite some time. It's incorporated all of that along with community engagement. Yes, I think at the time the CARP plan was developed and adopted, there still was that push-pull, is this environment or is this business? That kind of, I'm not sure what we're concerned about here. But hopefully when you go through the plan, you can't have a sustainable environment without having a sustainable community. It just doesn't work. Why would we just sustain the environment and the community disappears? And that includes our downtown businesses. That includes businesses across the town. So CARP took a hard look at all of these things and came up with some very excellent recommendations that Sam alluded to, particularly focus areas of the most vulnerable areas in town. And if you recall Sam's slide, Montauk has a number of those very vulnerable areas. I'll just also mention that there are a number in Springs as well. So we're facing this as a townwide issue, but right now we're going to focus on Montauk. Slide 3, Andy. So I just wanted to give examples, and I think, Andy, you're going to send out, CCOM's going to send out a resource page, and hopefully this presentation to all who signed up for this, so you could see these slides up close. This is just a quick view. So on the left, you had some of the recommendations from the Montauk Hamlet study and its nourishment, raising structures, and then looking to relocate if that area becomes unusable in the future. It's at least a plan we should know about before Mother Nature kind of sends us on a relocation without a plan. One of the areas that I am obsessed with finding information for on YouTube is what the ongoing recovery and restoration efforts are in Fort Myers Beach from Ian. And it's quite eye-opening to see what's still going on there, how far they've gotten, and even still to today, where issues like, what do we do with the debris, which is phenomenally expensive to remove. All of these issues that, unless you go through this experience, you don't really have it in the forefront of your mind. I know there's folks out there, I'm just gonna comment as me for a minute. I know that I hear from folks sometimes, let it all go, just let it all go. But I really don't think that what folks envision after things get let go or destroyed is really what happens. You don't have this pristine, lovely beach afterwards. You have an environmental hazard, you have a community tragedy, and you have years and years of recovery if it's not planned out. So if we were to decide to do absolutely nothing and let everything go, as I've heard people say, then what you're left with is a mess that really will impact every person in this town. So for me, that's not an option. Next slide, Andy. So on the right, you have an image from the CARP plan discussing some of the challenges in Montauk, and that's on the right, and on the left, that one came from the Hamlet plan. So this area has been looked at quite a bit over the years, and that's appropriate as well. Next slide, please. So it's a very long list. I don't really want to go through the whole thing. This is a list of the coastal resiliency measures that the town has taken over the years with the community. And it's quite a comprehensive list with starting with the Climate Action Plan. Now, what does that have to do with dealing with coastal erosion or what we're facing here in the town of East Hampton, and particularly in the hamlet of Montauk? Well, we know that the cause of the climate crisis and sea level rise and the intensifications of storms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It comes from the burning of greenhouse gases. And so the town's Climate Action Plan, which seeks and commits to reducing the town's use of fossil fuels and a transition to renewable energy, is actually just as important to keep at the level we're at of impacts and not increase further and further into worse and worse impacts. We've all seen the numbers. I'm not going to proselytize on that, but that is the other part of what all the studies that we do to see what we can do to increase resiliency here in East Hampton. So as you can see through the years, there's been a number of accomplishments that the town's created, along with the stakeholders and engagement with the community and all of the committees and advisory groups, citizen groups that are so essential to creating these plans. So from 2018, you see we are still ongoing. That's the Army Corps of Engineer Nourishment and FIMP that's happening in downtown Montauk. The evaluation of coastal erosion districts, which is a topic I have not made a decision on, which comes up frequently in discussions, because one of the biggest challenges that we face as a community, as a municipality, is funding. The Army Corps project, just this last one, that was $11.5 million. The project we're looking to do at Ditch is $4 to $5 million. How long these projects last is an issue. So where is the funding coming from? And that's something we all need to think about when we say we should do this. Because I hope there's more sources than just the town for paying for all of this. We've gotten great help from the state, from our federal partners. I was very happy that the Climate Change Superfund Act just yesterday passed through the houses of the New York Legislature, which would create a superfund of about $3 million replenishable, paid for by the oil companies that actually have created this, instead of being on the burden of solely the taxpayers, who really are the victims of all this. That being said, we're looking at, with the Army Corps of Engineers, on the dredging of Lake Montauk Channel, working with PSE&G to decommission the highly vulnerable electricity substation that used to be on Industrial Road and construct a new, more flood resilient substation. And also the Hamlet studies and the CARP study. Next slide, Andy. I'm going to go through this quickly. Again, this slide presentation will be given out to you, and please contact us with any questions that you have. So you could see that we've gone through the town plans, hazard mitigation plans, the townwide comprehensive wastewater management plan, again, working with the Army Corps, and then ongoing. In 2023, we applied, and you've been hearing about this grant, for a $600,000 grant that was issued. We were awarded by the Department of State, that we asked for. We put in an application to study resiliency planning for, I'm not going to say downtown Montauk, because we expanded it further than there, but the business district, and then further up to, say, I guess it would be the firehouse, Industrial Road, where our critical infrastructure is. So this grant, and as I said, funding is so important. It was the largest grant issued for Long Island last year. And when we get the final paperwork, which takes quite a long time from the state, to be able to begin this process is something that I'm really looking forward to. And also the Ditch Plains Dune Restoration Project, which is very important to me as well. We have now we hired Dr. Bokuniewicz to lead us down the path of where we should go with how we will protect the Ditch Plains neighborhood and the adjacent neighborhoods from coastal flooding with the new storm surges that we're seeing. And his recommendation on creating a 15-foot high FEMA compliant, and I'll explain why that's important for funding as well, for no other reason, is there is a funding opportunity through FEMA if you are a FEMA compliant dune. That's what makes that important, to protect that neighborhood, and also beach nourishment on the berm of the beach. As not all the sand has come back, we still see hard pin there. So we want to repair that berm. But to me, more importantly, we want to create that dune system to protect the community. So we're working on that. We just, we had an RFP opened up recently, closes on the 12th for the sand, for the phase 1 part, which would be dune nourishment happening this season. And then the next part, we just accepted a proposal from Coastal Science and Engineering for that design. And I was very impressed with that engineering group. They've worked up and down the coast on these FEMA engineered dunes. They did the one in Sagaponic. It's very healthy and successful. So they were selected by the evaluation committee, and we just adopted that resolution. We anticipate that being finished, hopefully, by the fall of 2024, but I hate to give out dates because these projects are very involved with permitting, et cetera, and the weather. So, but that is our anticipation, is to protect that beach for this this winter. And next slide, Andy. So we also passed in the town through the zoning code work groups, and we adopted it into the chapter 255, which is our zoning codes, new ideas that had not been in our purposes of zoning. Purposes of zoning is the first chapter in the 255 for zoning, and that tells you what the codes are supposed to do. So because of the plans that were adopted into the comprehensive plan, like the CARP plan and the Hamlet plans, we were able to add the ideas of town sustainability. And that's now under section G. It goes, I think, A through N or further, maybe a little further, P. So G now we have stated in our code section that guides us on zoning to safeguard the town's ability to meet the needs of the current population and provide a vibrant local economy without jeopardizing the future of the town. So, and keeping that for town generations. So this is that idea of, no, it's not the economy or the environment, folks, it's sustainability. And sustainability includes everything. To protect, ensure local business owners can continue to operate and residents can and want to continue to live here. To protect a local ecological integrity and biodiversity and minimize human degradation of natural systems, to manage all resources effectively and reduce waste, to prioritize and promote preparedness for and recovery from all types of extraordinary natural and man-made events or emergencies, to ensure that growth does not overwhelm the carrying capacity of human-made infrastructure or compromise the regenerative capacity of land, waters, and natural systems, and finally, to sustain and strengthen the diversity, cohesion, resilience, and local well-being of the community. So these are part of our new codes. The next slide, please, Andy. We were able to specifically add a section on coastal resiliency that was never there before. And this is to address fully the town's vulnerability to sea level rise, to secure our ability to maintain essential functions and protect critical infrastructure, and recover after significant storm events, optimize the management and protection of undeveloped and developed shorelines, promote proactive planning and implementation of adaptation and resilience strategies, and ensure the town's land use policy, regulations, and decisions are forward-looking and will advance preparedness, resilience, public safety, and economic viability. So we're already moving in this direction that Leo spoke of, and that very important project that was funded by the Nature Conservancy that happened, which was a preamble to getting together for the $600,000 grant, and the community engagement will have to develop these policies into an implementable plan. Because, you know, we can study all day long, but at some point we have to figure out how we're going to do this. We don't have the magic wand that I wish we had. We could just go, okay, everything is fixed. And we do have to look at the interconnection between all groups. Next slide. And this is, of course, just a letter that we got from the state that talks about the grant. And it is for sustainable planning for for coastal communities, risk reduction, revitalization, and restoration. And that's all implementation, and this will be our next step for Montauk. Thank you.
Kate, thank you so much. I mean, there's clearly a lot of work going on at the town level. We appreciate all the work you're doing and keeping Montauk at the forefront of the town's work. Thank you again. There are a bunch of questions, which we'll get to when we complete the panelist presentations. I have several in front of you. Many of them are for you, Kate. Just fair warning. I'd now like to introduce Ann Welker. Ann may be familiar to many of you. Ann is our recently elected Suffolk County Legislator for what's called the 2nd District, which is everything from Mauritius Inlet to Montauk Point. She is one of 18 legislators in Suffolk County government. She also served as Southampton trustee from 2018 to 2023. And that group of trustees are like our own East Hampton trustees, a couple of whom are with us today. Responsible for the preservation and protection of beach access, water quality, maritime traditions, and coastal related issues. Anne also knows Montauk well, having helped judge the Montauk School Fair here for the past several years. So thank you for that great work, Anne, and thank you for being here today. We very much appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Hi, everybody. It's great to see all of you here today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the Montauk Library for hosting, to LTV for recording and making it available for others that aren't able to be here today. Thank you to CCOM, especially Andy. Andy sent out an email probably, I don't know, feels like it was sometime in April requesting our slide. And I was like, you're a step ahead of me, Andy. But grateful to you, Andy, for your organization and conceptualization of this. Also, it's an honor to be up here with this distinguished panel. You guys have a lot of heavy hitters right here. It's wonderful to be up here. So I'm honored. But I think the most important people here today are you guys that are taking the time to be here, educating yourselves and being open to having this conversation. I was talking to my brother and his wife who live in Florida, and they live in Flagler County. Flagler just had a beach renourishment to the tune of $10 million, and they have ongoing, I think it's $7 million a year for into perpetuity. And climate change isn't something that can be discussed in Florida. So we are so lucky. It's like beach access. We take our beach access for granted. If you go to Rhode Island, you can't walk on the beach like we do here. So the opportunity to have this conversation today and everything that went into it, we are so grateful for. So thank you to CCM and CCOM and particularly Andy. I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity. I attended another panel discussion, slightly different than this, but along these same lines, another equally important discussion that took place in Newsday's TV studio the other night. And it was titled Paying the Price, Long Island's Stormy Future. And it consisted of an insurance industry expert, Dr. Christopher Gobler from Southampton Stony Brook campus, Adrian Esposito from the Concerned Citizen, Citizens for the Environment, and the Brookhaven Town Supervisor. So if you have the opportunity to view that, it was recorded and will be on Newsday's website. I would encourage you to watch that as well, because that's another important conversation. So Suffolk County, when you think about Suffolk County, it's 1,000 miles of coastline, but to us here in Montauk today, I mean, county government mostly takes place in Hauppauge. I fight to get the 2 meetings a year that take place in Riverhead or Riverside to happen, because for people that spoke recently at a meeting in Hauppauge, it's a day trip basically to go to Hauppauge to speak for 3 minutes during public portions. So I am so grateful to people who take the opportunity to do that. And I am going to encourage some of you to do that, because one of the questions that was asked of me that I speak about today was, as voters or as the public, how do we best support legislation that protects the environment? And when you vote in November, you'll flip over your ballot, and on the back, there's a resolution that has a somewhat unwieldy name, Suffolk County Water Quality Restoration Act. That the path of this act has been a little bumpy, shall we say. It went through the state legislature last year at both the Assembly and the Senate level. It was passed by the governor, but it came back down to the Suffolk County legislature and was rejected, unfortunately. Thank goodness, due to the efforts of many, many, many people, and this is something that has been worked on for more than a decade, it now has, once again, thanks to a home rule message at the county level, it's gone back up to Albany, it's gone through the Senate, through the Assembly, was signed by the governor. She did a little road trip down here last week to Captree, and she signed it. So now this bill will come back to the Suffolk County legislature, actually in Riverside, in Riverhead at the end of June. And the Suffolk County legislature once again will be given the opportunity to vote on this bill. I don't even want to say if, it's too important. When that passes the Suffolk County legislature, it will go on the back of our ballots in November. And the Suffolk County Water Quality Restoration Act is 1/8 of a cent on Suffolk County sales tax that will go towards a continuous funding stream so that we can not only have the funds to upgrade our IA septic systems, but also, for where appropriate, sewering. Long Island, specifically Suffolk County, with 1.5 million people, has approximately, between, the numbers range a little bit, but between 350,000 and 400,000 antiquated septic systems. Montauk is pretty much right in there because we are mostly reliant on septic systems. This bill is critical. The most important thing you can do to help Montauk, to help our environment, to help the economy is, in November, flip that ballot over and vote for the Suffolk County Water Quality Restoration Tax. I would implore you, not only you, but also to speak about this so that you educate your friends, because that was your friends and your neighbors and your family, because that was another question that was asked. What's the most concerning aspect of coastal resiliency for me personally? And at the county level, it's the interaction, it's the transparency of conversation, but it's also educating people. It's the community outreach, because as has been said here, where is this money going to come from to keep our coasts safe, to do whatever we need to do moving forward, whether it be with IA systems, whether it be with septic? It's a conversation, and money is an important part of it. So I'd like you to just take a moment and reflect back to a Suffolk County Coastal Resiliency Task Force that was put together in December of 2021 by then County Executive Steve Ballone, which funded a study and had about 35 collaborators with it, among them the previous Suffolk County legislator in this position, Bridget Fleming, who was a huge champion for not only the environment, but definitely for Montauk as well. Also Suffolk County Legislator Al Krupski, who is now the supervisor for the town of Southold. At that point, Ed Romaine, our current county executive, was on the Brookhaven supervisor. And also, she may be here with us today, Jennifer Youngst, who at that point was with the town of Smithtown, but she's now a Suffolk County executive. She is here. She's in the back over by the exit sign. Thanks, Jennifer. So that study looked at the 1,000 miles of coastline and what we were going to do with it. It looked at county-owned parcels, 2,200 county-owned parcels, and prioritized it down to 25 and then to 10. And then moving from there, 3 pilot projects are in the works to look at marsh restoration. One of them is at the Scully Estate in the town of Islip. Another is on the north side of the barrier island at Smith Point Park. And the third is at Cupsog, which is also another county-owned park at the end of Dune Road in West Hampton, to look at marsh there. So these pilot projects that were developed as a result of the Suffolk County Coastal Resiliency Task Force are intended to be replicable. So looking at coastal resiliency, looking at flooding, looking at coastal erosion, and saying, what can we learn from these when we do the work? And then how can we apply it to other parcels in the county that are waterfront owned? So I'd like to, just before I wrap up, just remind you of that unwieldy term, the Suffolk County Water Quality Restoration Act, that'll be on the back of your ballot in November, and the importance of speaking about it so that we have a funding source to continue to do this vitally important work. But also, I'd like you, even though Hauppauge may feel like it's a world away, which it is from Montauk, another planet indeed. The goals of our current county executive, Ed Romaine, align very closely with yours in Montauk, and specifically CCOM's geared toward and really committed to water quality, coastal resiliency, environmental sustainability, and renewable energy. So thank you all so much for being here today.
And thank you so much. It's great to know we have a friend in Hauppauge. I think, as your predecessor said to us once, the trick in Hauppauge is being able to count to 10. With 18 legislators, being able to count to 10 is critically important, and we rely upon your persuasive skills with your colleagues in the legislature. Thank you so much. I'd now like to turn to our last presenter of the afternoon, Thad Pawlowski. Thad is the co-founder and managing director of Columbia University's Center for Resilient Cities and Landscapes, which helps communities around the world adapt to climate change. He is also the founder of Partners in Public Design, an urban design and strategic planning practice that leads transformative community projects. Thad previously worked for New York City's Office of Emergency Management, Department of City Planning, and then helped the city recover from Hurricane Sandy at the New York City Mayor's Office. The other good news for us here in Montauk is Thad lives in Montauk, along with his wife Kelly, and lives in Culloden. So a very appropriate location to be living, and we really appreciate, Thad, your involvement here today. Thad, I will.
Yeah, Andy, can I use my slides?
Yes.
Okay, all right, cool. And I can take your computer?
Yes,
That's
indeed.
all right?
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. I'm the last presenter, and so can I take the screen so I can, I'm gonna do this like architect style. I'm an architect, so I use a lot of slides, but I go through them very quickly. And I'm going to, Andy asked me to just, believe me, this, 3 minutes, give me 3 minutes. No, this is heavy material, you know, what we've been hearing about, like how Montauk is so affected by climate impacts. And I guess I just wanted to say we're not alone, that this is a global problem. We're all in the same storm. We're in different boats, of course. Some people have bigger boats and smaller boats, but this is a global problem. And so I have this center, Andy mentioned, and we get to go around the world and learn about how different communities on the front lines of climate change are dealing with the impacts of climate change. And like Sam mentioned, we believe that we got to work with nature. So we're very interested in nature-based solutions. And we also, when we look at other places and we learn from them, it really challenges our ethics, you know? So we have to come with a framework of justice. We come with a framework of environmental justice that helps guide our thinking. So we form partnerships with different communities around the world, and then we go there and learn with them, and we bring our students and who are very international, and we learn about these case studies together and propose visions for the future. So we went to the Caribbean because this, like the global South, disproportionately feels the impacts of climate change. And the Caribbean is one of these places where we've got warming ocean temperatures leading to ocean acidification, the bleaching of coral reefs, as well as invasive species like sargassum washing up on the shores, off-gassing, creating all kinds of environmental harm. And then we have these increasingly devastating storms, tropical storms. And in this environment, we also have these emerging super leaders like Prime Minister Mia Mottley, who's calling for global climate justice, who's saying, you know, she's Prime Minister of Barbados. We didn't emit all these fossil fuel emissions. We are feeling the effects of it, however. And so it's important for us to learn from Mia Mottley, like that there needs to be some reparation for the harm that our industrialized society has caused to small island developing states like Jamaica, where we went with our students recently. And we worked with these local leaders. This is like the CCOM of Jamaica, Alligator Head Foundation. These women are leading this process to work with their community. They're in church basements, just like library basements, working with their community toward the regenerative vision of the future that involves economic development as well as coral reef restoration. This woman, Denise, for instance, is just planting these corals in a laboratory and then taking them out on the reef and planting them in the reef. And then they keep bleaching and dying, and she keeps doing it again. Like, that's resilience. She just keeps standing up to the horrible impacts of coral bleaching every day there. So we do community workshops, and we, you know, bring lots of different people together. In Jamaica, there's this incredible culture of the Maroon people, agroforestry, just incredible traditions. So we worked with them to come up with like a design framework, how we think about different strategies together that might help to create a more resilient and sustainable future. And that involves this term ridge to reef, thinking about water as a whole system, starting with the mountains, going through the rivers to the coastline. And then we have our students work with the local students, in this case, University of West Indies, to come up with like visions for the future of this place. And they take on different challenges. A big issue in Jamaica is 98% of the waterfront is owned privately. And that's like totally the legacy of colonialism. And it's getting worse, you know, and most of that is foreign ownership. So people in Jamaica are like, hey, we have these water resources all around us. Like, why can't we have access to them? So our students, along with the Jamaican students, came up with different ways to increase public access to the waterfront, both physically, but also like programmatically. How do we increase water sports? How do we, you know, teach Jamaican kids how to swim? And we came up with programs like this. And now we just got some funding from a Danish foundation to keep doing this work in Jamaica with the University of West Indies. So these are some of the visions our students came up with about increasing. So here's another place we went to recently, Punta Cana in Dominican Republic. You might know it as like this island beach paradise with palm trees, which is totally like, you know, made up. You know, it's just like this vision of tourism that is completely artificial. And the ministry, and it has horrible like social and environmental impacts to have this kind of like superimposed idea of paradise just dropped on people in a landscape. And so Shani from the Ministry of Tourism asked us to come and workshop an idea about how can we have a coherent plan for Punta Cana that treats the workers there like human beings with dignity, with decent housing, and also treats the environment with respect. for the future, especially because, the hotel developers, unlike our hotel developers in Montauk, they're like, they just do whatever they can get away with. They poison the mangroves, they cut them down, they do all kinds of terrible things. So our students worked with Ministry of Tourism and the local hotel developers to come up with different ideas about building a long-term design framework for how we respect the mangroves, the lagoons, as well as the beaches, and build a plan for densification, like future growth that would be include like workforce housing, as well as more different ways to enjoy the natural area, even as, I guess the big thing with all these places is that there will be loss, like there will be loss of coastline, there'll be loss of mangroves, there'll be loss of irretrievable natural resources. So in that loss, how do we come together to form, like to establish what our values are, what we want to hold on to, and then we can move forward with a plan together based on those values. So that's just a quick snapshot of some of our work. That was 4 minutes. Okay, sorry.
Dad, thank you so much. It's good to know that we're not alone, that applying learnings from other places can be applied successfully here. And as we move forward, we look to rely upon those resources and that experience to better inform how we do move forward. So we very much appreciate your participation here today. We have a number of questions and time is short. We're running a little 5 minutes behind, but I think we should allow ourselves another 10 minutes to handle some of the questions. Some of the answers are not necessarily easy, but I do think it's worth us looking at those. Let me just stop share that for a second. So let me begin with the first question which we've received, which is very germane to the ditch plains situation. And it refers to the rock revetment. And the question is, if the rock revetment at the Montauk Shores Condo Park is not in compliance, why hasn't it been modified? I would ask Cate to perhaps opine a little on the background with respect to ditch plains and the rock revetment.
Yeah, so first of all, I think at this point in time in history, when rock revetments were considered, okay, you have to do something, put a rock revetment in to save that particular property, which is important. However, what we know is that whatever kind of revetment you put in, whether it's compliance or not, it has impacts, because you can't do anything in nature without having impacts to the natural systems. Especially when you stick man-made stuff right in its way. So we know that there's scouring at ditch plains. Is Dr. Bokuniewicz still on?
Yes.
Because one of the first questions I had for him when I first met him on Ditch Plains Beach right after the storms was, how does that contribute to what's happening to ditch? And he had a number of answers for me. How about that old groin that's sticking out? Does that impact? And he said, no, that's so degraded, it has no impact. It may even collect a little sand, which could be a good thing. So it's a good question. When things are not in compliance and when DEC permits run out, why aren't they just immediately, taken to court? It sounds like that is the step, and it raises a lot of questions in people, is why isn't this happening? And it's because it's a lot more complicated than that. If it was that easy, it would be done. The DEC, who regulates a permit, which is the State Department of Environmental Conservation, they don't have a very large enforcement arm. And also, I think for that to be done, for something to be modified or moved, you would have to now really take a hard look about what impacts that's going to have as well. It's not something that you can just go pick it up and move it. And that is why I will say to everyone, when there is a revetment that is an application for a revetment is made, it's very important to make sure that all of the impacts are fully vetted, fully studied, and are mitigated. And the idea is the balance of the necessity of protecting a property is considered along with what is the impacts to the other properties, to the adjacent properties down drift. it is much easier. But they're not in compliance with the DEC permit, Laura, and
So,
They're supposed to be putting sand on those.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, rats forever, and they don't do it, and they're out of compliance with the septic, so we should be like.
They're in front of the planning board about that,
Yeah,
the septic
They're
now.
asking for expansion.
So,
and
Laura?
they're not taking care of
Laura.
stuff.
Yeah, but Laura, the DEC will have to come in and manage their permit, right? They're the authority that would take care of that.
The town has to alert and work with the
Well, don't know why you assume the town hasn't alerted the DEC. So, I mean,
so let's
So-
continue that discussion offline. Happy to have that. We're
Yeah.
going to have to wrap up here shortly. Dr. Bokuniewicz, anything you'd like to add with respect to the revetment at the trailer park and your observation of what's happening at Ditch?
Well, the revetment certainly seems to have been an emergency response to the imminent erosion at this trailer park, and it's a legitimate one. I don't see that the revetment itself is actually aggravating the condition further to the west at Ditch Plains. But certainly, if it's out of compliance, these things have to be dealt with honestly, and they have to decide what actually is the purpose of that revetment in the first place. If it's not in compliance, what can actually be done to achieve the benefits that they want. But I don't see that it's a sore point, but I don't see that is actually critical to the erosion at Ditch Plains.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bokuniewicz. Certainly there will be further opportunity moving forward for additional analysis. There's going to be a lot, as has happened since the winter storms, a lot of focus on Ditch Plains. I think much of the work that's about to begin in terms of the proposals for the dune restoration and the beach replenishment going to focus additional attention on Ditch. So we appreciate that. I'm going to move to one other question. We're short on time.
yeah, Andy, I just want to
yes.
assure people though, revetments, the impacts from revetments are important. And it's important to consider them, and bringing things back into compliance, it would be great if it was just that easy. But we're even seeing in tradition now in court where municipalities in the past have had kind of there was more of an appreciation when something went to court for the standing of the municipality, which is representing the community. We're not representing ourselves here. When a municipality goes to court, they're representing the community. But we've seen a shift in that as well, more towards property owners' rights. So as I said, in theory, you could look at a piece of paper and say, well, why isn't this done? But there are reasons why it's not done. It's not just because nobody cares or something's going on, and the town is not interested. These are complicated issues to remove something that protects a shoreline like that has already been there and already permitted. And there's, I think, a lot of steps before the DEC would be inclined to make people take it out.
Thanks, Kate. One question here regards the downtown, and it says the following: with regards to downtown Montauk and a coastal adaptation plan, how far inland from the first row of hotels would be a responsible distance to retreat? One, and can the funds from FIMP, I think the question was, can the funds from the FIMP project be used to buy out or help relocate that front row? Kate, I'm going to turn to you again.
Part two, no. FIMP is not a funding source for any type of relocation or any type of anything other than beach nourishment on the beach. That's what the FIMP, that's a federal project from the Army Corps of Engineers, and that's what that contract is for. For the first part, this is why we need to do the study. And this is why funding is so important, because where would we come up with the $600,000 to do a study? And that's why that award was so important to the state. I would be the last person to give any kind of details in this. We need to enlist coastal engineers, scientists like Dr. Bokuniewicz and Thad, and the community who are there every day and that anecdotal knowledge, that day-to-day knowledge is just as important as the others when it comes to the table to come up with these solutions. So I couldn't possibly answer that without having first seen an implementation plan. But with that being said, it is really time to look at how we're going to do this. We've talked about the studies. We've studied what's going on. We get it. Now it's time to say, well, what are we going to do about it? And how do we go about doing it? And how do we go about funding it? Because that's a realistic look at how to solve a problem.
Can I just say something quickly too, Andy? When we're talking about where do we stop in regards to retreat, if there's actually a storm that takes out that first row of hotels, there is not going to be a road to access downtown Montauk. So the first question is, how do you access Montauk? Because Fort Pond and the ocean will connect, and that will break off access, and there won't be an IGA. So we need to back up from the focus being the hotel and go back to transportation and food resilience first.
And I agree with that totally, Leo. I think that looking at any kind of issue from kind of a one point of view is not resiliency planning, and it's not planning for solutions. Everything gets impacted by a storm. Again, because this is so near and dear to my heart, I spend a lot of time watching what's going on down in recovery when Ian with the 12-foot storm surge went through Fort Myers Beach Business District and residences. And they are an inch away from where they were. So this is something we need to look at very seriously. And obviously more than what about the hotels? It's not the hotels. We have to protect everything, and we have to look for a sustainable future for everything. Critical infrastructure, emergency services, hurricane preparedness. This is all intertwined together, and you can't have one without the other.
Thank you, Kate. I'd like to wrap with the panel, thanking again you, the audience, and especially the panel for their consideration, for their preparation for today, and for what will be a series of discussions with the community about how we move forward. We're at the tipping point of the need to actually identify a plan by which we move forward, an implementable plan, to Kate's point. And I look forward to that. Having been part of this process for some time, I look forward to continuing to be part of it. John and I have often had bets about when things would happen. And I think even John is thrilled that we now have downtown beach sand after many years of waiting. So good things are happening. We will look for you to be part of that process moving forward. So thank you. And on behalf of CCOM, we look forward to engaging you further as we move forward. Thanks, everybody.
Pleasure to meet you too. I'll make sure to vote for that. You're absolutely. Tell all my friends too. So important. Yeah. Thanks for making it very clear.